I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of things that you probably walk past every day, but they're maybe kind of high above or just below your sort of eye level, and you miss. But there's a lot of local history everywhere, and I'm going to share with you just a few of those things. So this is look up and look down, and I think after this talk, your neck is probably going to hurt a bit when you come out and you start realizing that a lot of this, even though my focus is Stoke Newington, is everywhere. Even Hackney. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amir. I'm slightly interested in Stoke Newington's history. It's been a passion project for 13 years and counting. This is the website. You can find updates about upcoming events and talks and so on. We are in Hackney, of course. We are right there. Those of you that know my focus, I'm going to be talking specifically about Stoke Newington, the former borough. Right? 60 years ago, it was merged with Shoreditch and Old Hackney to form the new London Borough of Hackney. But my interest is specifically the old borough. Okay? So we're going to talk about boundary markers and we're going to talk about parishes. So if you know about anything that's outside of this area, it's great, but really let me know about stuff that falls into that nice sort of area right there. If you want to follow my updates and get your daily dose of Stoke Newington history, you can do it pretty much everywhere these days. A lot of old maps, anecdotes, old photos. Pretty much, I think, Facebook is now going on for 13 years, which is great to see that a lot of people have been sort of following it for that long as well. Now, we're going to talk about things that are up and down. I know that this looks like a slide from a couple therapy session, but really it's all about being that person that's quite curious. And as you walk down the street, you start noticing things. And you might ask yourself, what is that plaque high above on that building? Is that something old? And what's on it? Or you might just wait for the bus and you look down and you realize, oh, this looks quite sort of old and worn out, and what do those sort of initials mean? And that's how you end up giving a talk for 40 minutes about all these things, because there's so much local history everywhere. So I'm going to start with things that are up. You can see that sometimes they're not really at sort of eye level. Some of them might be familiar to you. Some of them are kind of new, and you're going to go and hunt for them. This is, like I said, just a small collection, and I'm going to try and go through all of them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is signage. So when you look around, some buildings still have these very faded signs, almost like ghost signs, where lettering used to be. This is actually the former Marks and Spencer branch in Stoke Newington High Street. Yes, Stoke Newington used to have a Marks and Spencer's since 1914. Okay, the high street was filled with a lot of department stores and chains as any other high street in the country. It was no big surprise or no big shock to anyone. Unfortunately, that sign was cleaned up a few years ago when the now Sports Direct building got a bit of a renovation. You could actually have read it up until a few years ago. Now you have to really squint, and you can still see it. This is what it used to look like back in the day. This branch opened in 1914. It closed in 1972. Some people claim, or have told me over the years, that they blame the switch to a one-way system as far as the decline of the high street, because since the mid-60s, you only get northbound traffic. So did that impact trade on Stoke Newington High Street? Some people will say yes. Other people just say, hey, there was a thing called the 70s, all right? Another example, almost opposite, is Stoke Newington Bookshop, which I think sort of a lot of people here know. Next time you go and visit, have a look just above the current signage. Can you just make out what it says? All right, even a bit closer. Yes, very faded, but this used to be a bank branch. This was Barclays. There were quite a few bank branches on the high street. Today there's only one left. And this one was the Barclays one. Looked a bit different. It actually made it to the national press when it was firebombed in 1971 by the Angry Brigade. They were very angry, and they wanted to make that known. So this is what the building used to look like when it was a bank. And the bookshop opened in 1987. Other things, when you look up, you can see the original names of pubs. So this is the Clarence Tavern in Church Street, and you can see just the kind of the pediment with the original pub name. The pub was built in 1860 as the Clarence Tavern. The terrace next to it was called Clarence Terrace. It had a few other names over the years. It was then renamed to Steptoe's Wine Bar. It was then the Daniel Defoe. And for a brief period that people always tell me, don't mention it, it was the Stoke Newington Tea House with 2 lovely kitchen islands instead of a proper pub counter. But it was reverted back. The current signage actually says the Clarence, but if you go on their website, it actually says the Clarence Tavern. So I'm not sure why they didn't actually have their current sign to reflect the old one. This is now Matthias Road, a big 1930s building. It used to be builders merchants, and now it's vacant. It's on the market if anyone is looking to open a boutique hotel in gentrified Hackney. There's a very faded sign that you can't actually see, but the more interesting item here is also at the very, very top, and it's this anvil. So this was originally Smith & Sons, and you can see that the whole shop, which is almost like the size of a department store, was called Anvil House, and the anvil is still up there. You can see that all the catalogs that they had, this was their brand. So this was Anvil House, Matthias Road, and we're going to see that it also ended up in some of the products that they sold and are still around. This is a photo of what it used to look like. And next time you walk past, if you pop into the Army Navy, look up, you can still just about make up the builders merchants below the anvil, but you have to look really, really close. Now, Anvil was their brand, so in Stoke Newington you can still see these beauties, so utility covers and even a coal hole cover that has Anvil on it. They didn't make them, they sold them. But ironmongers and builders merchants, they would ask the foundry to just put their name on it as a way of advertising. And we're going to see that later as well. Next up, we're going to talk about boundary plates, one of my favorite topics. A local authority from the days of parishes to metropolitan boroughs had to mark its boundaries so people know what boundary or what borough they're in, what rates they're paying. If the road needs fixing, who do you complain to? Which mayor are you going to sort of say, you need to fix the road or you need to fix the sanitation? So Stoke Newington Borough, which was created in 1900, had these lovely boundary plates dotted around all the roads just surrounding the borough. Unfortunately, today, only 8 survive. And you can see the location. You could see them in old photos. They were everywhere. Every junction, every main road, you needed to know, am I in Stoke Newington? Am I in Hackney? Am I in Islington? But a lot of them got removed either for housing redevelopment and they don't get put back. Sometimes even when buildings get renovated and they get repointed, the builders just take them down and don't put them back up, which is a shame. For a boundary marker, they're actually quite easy to miss when you think about something that people were meant to be made aware of and kind of see. Can you spot it in this photo? Yay. All right, it's just up there. Yeah, you see, some people said, what? Yes, that is that. It's not a BT box for the internet. This is an old 1901 boundary plate. This is a close-up. So center of road. So you're in Hackney, you're in Stoke Newington, all right? This is another example from Green Lanes, just below a lovely late 1950s street nameplate. So they're all the same. They don't have a number. We're going to see that later on. And they were everywhere. And you saw them in a lot of old photos. What used to be called the Arsenal Tavern, which is now called Brook Gate Pub, just on the corner of Blackstock Road and Montgrove Road, actually has 2. How lucky are they? And you can also see this is not just the local authority boundary, but you actually have a postal district boundary as well between N4 and N5. Ooh, yes, exactly. But postal districts is a different talk. This is just at the very bottom of Stoke Newington Road, just before Kingsland High Street. And again, there are 2 in this photo. Can you spot those 2? A lot of very happy faces. People can spot the boundary plates in the photo. This is a great party game, by the way, if you ever want to keep people entertained. And these are those boundary plates, still there. Now, this is one that I've discovered only a few years ago, and I was very excited. This is an old archival photo, and the Riversdale Road sign, or I thought, was still there, but not the boundary plate. So I got a bit disappointed and annoyed until I realized, hold on, I'm looking on the Islington side. Riversdale Road was also on the Stoke Newington side. The problem is when I turned my head, this is what I was faced with. And I thought, is the boundary plate still there? So I had to look around, and I was so happy when I saw that it's still there, just hidden away, and you could just about catch a glimpse of it. And every few months, usually during the winter, I would walk past looking very suspicious, trying to kind of catch a glimpse of that boundary plate. And I was extremely happy when a few years ago, the owner, I think, sort of cut back all the greenery, and now the number 8 boundary plate is up there on display for everyone to appreciate. Now we're going to go to Newington Green. So this is not a Stoke Newington Borough one. This is a pre-Borough boundary plate, and this is very special. Can you see it? Yeah, it's great. It's right up there just above the shops. This is a double boundary marker. Ooh, yes, indeed. It's the only one I've seen. So you can see that this is between St. Mary Islington and Stoke Newington. And you can see it's very descriptive, you know, post, sunken road, and exactly the distance and so on. You've got the names of the church wardens. They became mayors. So John Johnson Runts was the first mayor of Stoke Newington, and William Eve a few years later. Let's talk about street signs. So we talked about boundary plates. Street signs, the old ones, are very easy to miss because some of them are very faded. Some of them were painted like this one. And in some cases, the nameplates are so discolored that they almost blend in with the building, and you can really miss them. This one is just in Finsbury Park Road. And you can see it was painted. You can also see that there are multiple layers, because sometimes when they updated the postcode, they had to paint the sign again. I did a bit of digital reconstruction of what it looked like. So this is give you a sense. So it said Finsbury Park Road, South Hornsey. What is that? We're going to talk about South Hornsey in a minute. And also N, the pre-1917 postal district. This is one of the layers. I suspect maybe there was another one when they changed it to N16, or when South Hornsey was absorbed into Stoke Newington and they just got rid of it. Can anyone spot the street sign here? That one, obviously. Okay. Now this one is very special because not only is it old, but it's actually the previous street name of Balbord Road. So this actually says Broughton Road, and it's also very rare because it's got N, which is pre-1917. Only 4 street signs in Stoke Newington has that old postcode. The road was renamed in 1937 to Barbold Road, and I suspect it was just painted black rather than getting removed. Maybe someone thought instead of removing it, let's keep maybe a bit of the history of the street, but so the postman and people don't get confused, we'll just paint it black. So a few years from now, a history geek will spot it, take a photo, post it on Twitter, and it will go viral. This is my reconstruction of it. So from one that's completely black to now one that's completely white. This is in Mount Grove Road. This is late 1950s Borough of Stoke Newington sign with this sort of lovely Gothic sort of typeface as the name of the borough. Very easy to miss. I mean, if you just walk around, why would you look up? And even if you do look up, you might kind of think, you know, this is what part of the building. But yeah, it's an old street sign. I've campaigned the council for quite a few years now to preserve and restore these old signs. I was horrified a few years ago to discover that the council's policy was to remove and destroy old signs that were deemed illegible, which I found was really distressing on many levels, because on one hand, they realized their value because they destroyed them so they don't end up on eBay, but they didn't keep them and restore them because of that same historical heritage value. But the good news is the council restored 4 last summer, and the fight is on. We're going to try and get 8 more restored. So keep an eye. Might need some sort of crowd funding or something like that. But we're getting there. But hopefully when people see them now, they recognize their value as well. Spot the very old subsidiary naming plaque on this one. This is Bowling Road, and this terrace used to have a different name, and we're going to see that. This used to be called St. Leonard's Place. Every terrace, every row used to have its own name, subsidiary naming. So you had like Abney Place, Abney Villas, Clissold Place, Clissold Terrace, and those were abolished, mostly in the 19th century. But some of those names still survive today, like in this case. Very easy to miss, but next time you go to Mickey's Chippy, and you've got a bit of time to wait for your cod, walk outside and have a look. This is the list of all the names, the street names and subsidiary names that were abolished in Stoke Newington. Many, many, many names. It was compiled by a local historian, Francis Baxter. And it's an amazing resource of all those names that every terrace used to have that were abolished and absorbed into the street names that we know today. So in Church Street alone, there used to be about 10 different terraces and rows with their own names, like Clarence Terrace, for example. And you can see right there on page 6, St. Leonard's Place. Another example of subsidiary naming is in this photo, which is Green Lanes and Church Street. Right there. Newington Hall Villas. So this whole terrace was named Newington Hall Villas after Newington Hall, which was this. That's the same spot. Newington Hall was one of the many mansions and large detached houses along Church Street when it was the home of very wealthy bankers and merchants, you know, pre-gentrification. And you can see that it occupied the entire site of that terrace, and 35 Victorian houses replaced it when it was demolished. You can appreciate it here as well. So this is Church Street. This is the New River, where the allotments are today. A bit different. Another terrace that they built on the site of Newington Hall is Clissold Park Villas, and the name survives, was restored a few years ago, which is great. So let's talk about tablets. A lot of things to appreciate and see. This is Barrett's Grove, and one day I was walking, as you do, and I looked up, as you do, and I noticed that square thing at the very top of that sort of gable end, but you couldn't actually see a thing. Now, luckily, I've got a good camera lens, like the paparazzi one, the one that you walk in the street with and people get very nervous. It's all legit, I've got the permits, but I took it back and I could see that there was actually writing on it, on this tablet. It's right up there. Can anyone make out what the writing is? Okay, a lot of murmuring, I'll save you the... All right, this is the boundary wall of the freehold property of the Barrett's Grove estate, built in the 1860s. And it's right up there. And again, you think, if it was so important for people to know that this is the boundary or the property, why put it so up high that no one can see it? Who was meant to read it? Unfortunately, it's out of view as the site adjacent to it is being redeveloped, so it will never be seen again. Yeah, but I took the photos. So, you know. Next one is a tablet that commemorates the developer of a terrace and the builder. This is in Stoke Newington Road, between number 97 and 99. Right up there. And this is what it looks like. So it's a foundation stone. So Samuel Arno Sr., and you can see the date that the terrace was built. And he also gave a nod to the builder. Nice touch. This is the terrace that he built, and Samuel Arno built the pub, and he also owned at one point the Coach and Horses in Stoke Newington High Street, and also the Prince of Wales. Today it's known as the Prince, not far away as well. So you've got that foundation stone that, again, very easy to miss, but once you start stretching your neck and look up, you notice all these lovely things and bits of local history. This is what the pub used to look like when it was originally the Hare and Hounds. It was an inn, so the main road was filled with all these inns for people traveling down to London. But by the 19th century, the late 19th century, they were rebuilt as these Victorian pubs. So it was called the Hare and Hounds. And the new pub, when you look up next time at 97 Stoke Newington Road, you can still see the hounds chasing the hare. This is a very special one because it's quite unique. This is in Manor Road, a confectionery works. You've got the Star of David on the two gable ends of this former confectionery works. I was really surprised by this because the idea that the Jewish owner of this confectionery works would actually put the Star of David at 1911 when they opened this factory, I'm still finding quite puzzling. Was it a matter of maybe sort of pride in their faith? Did they feel safe enough in this particular area at the time as well to have that on display? You could argue it's not maybe that prominent, but there are two of them and it's quite visible. It's not something they try to kind of hide and not have in view. So it's right up there. One of them has 1911, the other one does not. David Politi that opened the confectionery works, he was a Greek Jew. He emigrated in the 1860s. He started trading in Highbury in 1870. And then he opened this factory in 1911. And this mentions the date. And this is what it used to look like. And you can see it's also in the illustration. They're remembered, and there's a lot of sort of very fond memories I've been kind of hearing over the years for kind of their Turkish delight and the tin kind of cans that they kind of came with. You can still get those. I've got 3, so I'm a bit of a collector now. But they're lovely. Sometimes they come on eBay. Definitely something to kind of get a hold of as far as local history. Date plaques and decorative panels. So this is a few examples from schools. This is William Patton School in Stoke Newington Church Street. And you can see that high above at the very, very again. Who is going to see this? Impossible to see from here, but it's actually the year that the school was built, 1891, by the SBL, the School Board for London. They built all the late Victorian schools across London. You're going to see them everywhere, and they've got a very similar design as well. They also always have the name of the school. Almost always, in my experience, it's named after the street where it's in. So originally it was called Church Street School. And you can see it up there. This was the original site of the school, the village smithy. Storrs Forge was right there for 200 years, but they had to make way for the new school. The area was getting more populated. Kids had to go to school, so they built all these Victorian schools. In this case, the smithy had to find a new spot. This is another school, but this is a former school. So this is Oldfield Road. And if you look up again at the kind of those, above the windows, there's all these decorative panels that you can't actually see from the street. You really need to get like a binoculars or one of those lenses, because once you start looking, you realize that there's so much beauty and there's so much sort of attention to detail and design that, I mean, unless you're a bird or you look really closely, you're going to miss. So I'm finding it, like I said, fascinating that these items, even though they weren't in plain sight, a lot of thought and care was put into their design. You got the name of the school again. And a few more panels. All right, and everyone's favorite topic, rainwater hoppers. Woo, yes. Just a few examples. This is the electricity substation in Wordsworth Road. It's very easy to miss, but the two hoppers actually have the initials of the local authority. You've got one on either side, and that's S&B for Stoke Newington Borough. Again, who's going to see it? But let's not get the cheaper one off Amazon. Let's do it properly. So you've got 2. And the architects that designed that substation in 1929, Hobden and Pori, they were quite prolific in the area. They also designed the Simpsons clothing factory in Stoke Newington Road. They also designed the now demolished Clissold Road Bath, where the leisure center is today. So it opened in 1930. And they also designed the World War I Memorial Hall that's now part of the public library. So quite a few buildings and municipal buildings in the area. Other interesting sort of rain hoppers are in Lordship Park. So these houses were built in 1865, and you can see at the very, very top, you've got these Gothic gargoyles. That's one of them, that's another, and this very peculiar one as well. But they put the thought and money into having those items all the way up there. This is an up-close one. So those were all the things when you start looking up, you're going to start noticing and appreciating, hopefully. So now we're going to start looking down. Bless you. When you look down, there's all sorted items on pavements, on footpaths. I'm just going to try and cover a few. My favorite topic of all, coal hole covers, right? These are beautiful plates that used to be used when people used to get coal delivered to their house or shop to keep them warm at night. And they weren't just utilitarian objects, they were also designed. They sometimes had the name of the foundry or the ironmonger that sold them. Usually you see them in front paths or on pavements. The coalmen, as you're going to see, used to come, lift them, and deliver the coal so they don't have to go through the house and leave a mess. These are just some photos to give you a sense of what it used to look like. There's a lot of mess, but I guess that's because it's the pavement. Because usually, and you're going to see that it was a skill, some would even say an art form, to knowing how to deliver coal. So for like more residential property, to keep it tidy, they would just throw the sack and it would just land right on the hole. This is what it looks like from inside, because you've always wondered, what does the coal hole look like underneath, right? I know I did. So I was very pleased when someone sent me those photos. Very pleased. I was so interested in coal hole covers that I was curious how many different designs can I spot in Stoke Newington. So I did a survey and I documented 103 different designs, styles, and sizes. They come in different sizes, 12, 14, 16, and 18 inches. So I walked around and went into people's front paths. A lot of very worried people looking through the window when the guy's sort of kneeling and taking photos. I had to explain what I was doing. It didn't always help. There's such a huge variety of these designs. Some of them are very common, and you might say, oh, I've got that one. Some are very rare. So as you're doing this survey, it was very, I would say, exhilarating to find a new one that's sometimes a one-off. So just to help you appreciate the beauty of coal hole covers, you can see sometimes you got the names of the ironmonger or the foundry that made them. These are unique designs to those foundries. So you've got the Sunburst, this is Clark Hunt, and you've got the Jones Company, so this is the Cannon Foundry. So they've got this cannon. Sometimes Arsenal fans ask me, do you have one? You can see the different varieties. Sometimes you would get these pieces of glass as prism just to provide lighting. You sometimes get ventilation, as we're going to see, but they come in many, many different designs. It was also just to prevent people from slipping. It's not just about the beauty of the object, but in the Victorian home, everything was meant to kind of convey respectability. When someone comes to your house, they don't just appreciate your lounge and the beautiful architecture, they also appreciate, apparently, your coal hole cover. A few more. Some of them were patented, because there were all these kind of like self-locking mechanism, anti-slip. People tried to kind of portray their coal hole covers as very special, unique, the one that you need to have. This is just from a catalog. You can see sort of Haywards. They were very, very famous. They've got their sort of patented safety coal plate with all the mechanism. Most, though, only had like a chain, so people couldn't just steal it. But you can see the different sizes, different designs. There was a proper catalog. You would go and pick one. This is my collection. I think I ended up selling 3, but knowing that people actually put them back in the front path made me happy, but I still have about 6. If you have one you don't want, or don't need, I'm pretty much a haven for coal hole covers. So half of them I was given by people that just thought, I've got one in the garden, do you want it? Yes, please. Coal hole covers became, if you like, an item that people started to appreciate usually from the 60s onwards. There was actually an exhibition in Soho in 1962 where they were displayed on walls. In the 1970s, Lily Goddard, who's a very famous textile designer, she used coal hole covers in her designs and her prints. Great book, highly recommend it. More recently, people are doing all these prints and rubbings, so all these manhole cover designs are very much in fashion, so you can get them now in books, you can even get them as posters. I was very happy when a ceramist recently, a local one, got in touch and said, look what my project now is. I'm actually creating bowls from coal hole covers. So you know what I use for my cornflakes every morning. You can even get coal hole cover coasters. If you actually look around, there's so many kind of related items, but it's great to see that people are discovering the designs, they're discovering the local history of all these items. Boot scrapers, because you have to really. Very easy to miss, but in the days where there was a lot of muck on the roads and sometimes houses may not have even had doormats, before you entered someone's house or a church, you can look outside when you leave, there's a few surviving ones, there were all these boot scrapers, but again, a very utilitarian object that a lot of design and thought was put into it. It was the first thing you saw when you went to someone's house, right after you gazed at their coal hole cover. Of course. So they come in a variety of shapes, very ornate, very decorative. This is St. Mary's New Church in Stoke Newington. This is a huge one. You can probably get 5 people using it at the same time. This is Lordship Park. And I'm just fascinated just with the variety. You think for something so simple, you just scrape your boot, but there's different ways of designing it. This is another one in Lordship Park. This is by the Red Lion in Church Street. This is actually part of the gate itself. So you can see that the railings actually had a built-in boot scraper as well. Not bad, not bad. This is a feline-themed one in Queen Elizabeth Walk. And when you see the catalog, wow. I mean, it's almost like a birthday present, right? I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful. Let's talk about utility covers, also known as manhole covers, access covers, and so on. The first one I'm going to focus on is these ones in Green Lanes between Manor House and Church Street. These are the London County Council tramways. So these are relics of the trams that we used to have until 1952. There were trams everywhere, and today they're surviving purely based on these utility covers you can spot in Green Lanes and also Seven Sisters Road. So you can see council tramways. This is Seven Sisters Road, still in the old borough, by the way, opposite Finsbury Park, and this is Green Lanes. This is what they used to look like. So this is the number 33, doing its way from Manor House all the way down. You can see that, so the trams were introduced in 1901, and they actually coexisted with trolley buses, which were introduced in 1931. Trolley buses were electric buses, and you can see they draw the electricity from overhead wires. Trams, some of them used overhead wires, some of them used the conduit system. In London, sometimes you had to switch. Central London was the conduit, so there was a slot in the tracks. Out to London, it was all overhead wires. Certain trams would have to switch at one point from the overhead to the conduit and other way around. This is Clissold Park, this is Green Lanes. And you have to appreciate trams in their beauty and color, because I don't think those photos do them justice. Apparently they were very noisy, not very comfortable to sit on, and from an infrastructure perspective, if you think about maintaining the overhead wires and the tracks compared to buses, the view was that buses were more flexible and also more cost-effective. There used to be a tram station in Manor House, just by the station, and there were steps leading from that all the way down to the underground. So this was seen as one big public transport complex where you had the trams, the trolley buses, the underground, all in one place with those shelters. Moving on to electricity. Yay, electricity. This is Church Street. You can see some very old utility covers, like this one on the corner of Defoe Road. If you have a closer look, you can see MBSN, which we all obviously know stands for Borough of Stoke Newington. I love this crowd, great. So Stoke Newington got its electricity for the first time in 1903 from Hackney, because there was a bit of paperwork delay in getting its own substation, but it did get the one in Edwards Lane, the first one built in 1906, and that was the first time it had its own electricity. And you can see all these covers still surviving, some of them very, very worn out. So Stoke Newington, think about the number of kind of the boots and the shoes over the many, many decades that have stepped on it and maybe never even wondered and even had a look and seeing, what is this manhole cover that I'm stepping on? But not you, not after today. NR, there are a few of these utility covers that are quite enigmatic, and you think, what does NR mean, or what did it used to stand for? The best guess that I have for this one is New River. Okay, because the New River Company used to be one of the water companies that supplied the area. Sometimes people tell me, no, it's meant something else. I don't think we'll ever know unless you can find a real credible source. And you can see these, they're quite small. They're kind of like dotted around. So you've got NR for the New River. Different styles, but this is Church Street. So the New River opened in 1613 to bring drinking water to London from Hertfordshire, originally terminating in Seldos Wells, but since 1946 terminating in the East Reservoir in Stoke Newington. This used to be the view from the filtering beds, where now there's housing from the 1990s. But the thing is, when you start looking down, you realize, hold on, there's NR. What's AC? The best guess that someone told me was it's aircock. Don't laugh, yeah, really. It's a valve that apparently is used to release kind of pressure. So this is the best guess for AC. And I thought, okay, NR and AC. But then I thought, okay, hold on, there's AP. What's AP? Any guesses? Anyone knows? But then you realize, you start looking, and there's more of these. So these are not just Stoke Newington, but again, if you're looking for geeky party games, highly recommend this one. You can guess, but there are quite a few of them, similar style. I wish I would find one for those. This is for a different style, but you can see that the DV gives you an idea of what those names might mean. Drain covers, just got a couple of minutes to go through those and boundary post as well, hopefully. So this is a SHLB from 1884. This is a drain cover. This is actually South Hornsey Local Board in Stoke Newington, and this is in Gunster Road, corner of Walford Road. So Hornsey, if you think about the old parish, is present-day Haringey. So you think, why Hornsey in Stoke Newington? Because Hornsey, you can see at the very bottom there, it actually had an area that's half of Clissold Park at the very bottom, and it also had two detached areas in the heart of Stoke Newington. These kind of, they were called Hornsey detached exclaves that were surrounded by Stoke Newington. And this is what South Hornsey Local Board looked like. It had these islands that it administered. It had its own town hall, as we're going to see. But it had these areas right there. This was the South Hornsey Town Hall in Milton Grove. It was actually Stoke Newington's first town hall from 1900 until 1937. The view is a bit different today if you struggle to place this. So today it's a 1960s housing development. The only surviving thing is the foundation stone from 1881. You can still see it there. This is a later one, so Hackney Board of Works, 1884. There's a few of those around, I think only 5 in Stoke Newington. So Stoke Newington and Hackney were merged from 1855 to 1894 in this municipal unity, if you like. Hackney was much bigger, Stoke Newington was smaller, felt underrepresented, wanted to break free many, many times, and eventually it succeeded in 1894, became its own borough in 1900, and in 1965 was absorbed into Hackney with Shoreditch. Just a few examples of other drain covers with the names of the foundries and the ironmongers that you can appreciate. Some of them have the years. Okay, so like I said, when you look down, you start noticing all these things. Freaks out your friends. All these old names, you can then see them in catalogs. James Gibb, a lot of those in Hackney. And the last section that I will go through very quickly in 30 seconds, even though technically I think Rob took the first 2 minutes, I'm not going to say anything. Boundary posts. So we saw that the borough had all these plates high above, but parishes actually had these posts in the ground. So in both cases, I think they're easy to miss. So this is a Stoke Newington parish boundary marker from 1896 in Ede Road. So those are sunken in the ground. Only a handful of those survive today. This is a Hornsey parish marker in Clissold Park. So I told you that half of Clissold Park was in Hornsey, and you still have a few of its boundary posts dotted around. You can see they actually had an individual number. So this is number 175 because, you guessed it, there's a catalog with all of those and the placement. So this is number 175. Next time you go and wait for the 393 bus on Church Street behind the bin, there's actually a group of three boundary posts. You can see there's two Hornsey ones. One is from 1859, the other one is 1887, and you've got a Stoke Newington one next to them. This is number 112. And this is exactly the spot because that's the division between Stoke Newington and Hornsey. And you can see in old maps that bit of Clissold Park is labeled as Parish of Hornsey. In old photos like this one, you kind of see on the side there, if you really want to geek out and say, ooh, an old boundary post in an old photo. Yes, they were everywhere. And just the last few ones, this is a very sad looking one. This is in Palatine Avenue. There he is. You can see it listed there again in the catalog. And one of the moments of joy that I get to experience pursuing this hobby is when someone sends me a message like this. And when I posted one of those photos, and someone says, hey, I live in Albion Road, and in our back garden there's this thing that looks like that. Do you know what this is? And I couldn't believe it, because some of these boundary posts were in people's back garden where the boundary line used to go. And we actually discovered, myself and a good friend who's a boundary markers expert, we paid a visit. We kept that expression for the whole day, I guarantee you, because we were so happy to see that there was one that was above ground and we didn't even know about. There's a very old one in Clissold Park. You can see it says SNB, Stoke Newington Boundary. So this is just on green lanes. And you can see them marked in old maps, boundary post. And that was it. So I managed to get through all of this, which I think is amazing. So look up and look down. If you find something new, let me know. Thank you very much.